One of the things, I live right near the Canadian border. I live north of Bellingham, and you can almost throw a stone to the Canadian border from where I live. So I get most of my news from Vancouver, more so than even Seattle. So I hear the grumblings about the NEB and SEPA on the Vancouver news all the time. So one of the things we wanted to make sure, because looking at these programs from the 30,000-foot level, the participate funding, the landowner, the land managers, they look really good on paper, but we wanted to make sure we asked some people that were involved. So our next speaker, and I'm going to mess up your last name, Melanie Omeniho, who's the Chief Administrative Officer of the Metis Regional Council, has actually been someone who has received some of the participant funding from the NEB. So we asked her to come and speak about how that worked or how it didn't work. Melanie.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to first off thank the organizers for inviting us to come and present here. It's actually the last day and a half has given me a more global outlook because things are done very differently here than they are where we come from. I work for the Métis Nation of Alberta. The organization that I actually work for represents the Métis people that live in central Alberta. The Métis people are one of the 3 Aboriginal groups of Canada that are recognized and acknowledged within the Canadian Constitution. So we're part of the 80% that they spoke about receiving intervenor funding, and that we have been an intervenor prior to 2010 and now. We were involved in the Trans Mountain Pipeline job that was done through Jasper National Park, which was a significant piece of work, both through consultation and actually in having that pipeline put through, because that was done in about 2010, I think. So we were interveners before there was funding to be an intervenor, and then we have applied for intervenor status in the Trans Mountain Pipeline job that is presently being proposed, that's supposed to go from just the east side of Edmonton to the west coast. And we were also interveners on another pipeline job that actually went through the Canadian Environmental Assessment Organization, CIA they call it, which also had intervenor funding. We are I want to tell you, as things are done differently in Canada. As the Aboriginal groups in Canada, we have a relationship with what we call the Crown, and it's a pre-European contact relationship was established, and those relationships mean a lot, and they form the process for which Aboriginal people must be consulted when issues potentially could impact or affect their ways of life. So that's part of why we have entitlement to become interveners. Not everybody that applies to be an intervener gets to be an intervener. We have lots of environmental groups and different people that apply that may not be eligible based on the criteria that the NEB has established for intervener. So when we're working as an Aboriginal group, we're not. First off, I want to tell you that as the Métis, we don't receive a lot of excess dollars, and we don't have. We're not dependent on the Crown for our existence or the government for our existence. We are all contributing tax-paying members of society, and so we all work just like everybody else does. And so when we're applying for these resources, we don't have some great pot of money that we can be able to participate in the regulatory process, which, for starters, is very complicated. And so when the regulatory process starts, they contact us and identify that this project may potentially be in our backyard, and that the application process is being started, and that if we want to apply, we may at that time, and we did. And once we had intervenor status, we were also then given the opportunity to apply for intervenor participant funding. The funding is defined here as modest. Actually, modest isn't even a good word for that. But the reality is that we get a very limited amount of funding because there are, like she said, 400 people have applied for intervenor status. So, you know, $1 million and some dollars going amongst however many people are approved for intervenor funding means that we all get a very little sliver of money. But that little sliver of money assists us in being able to engage the kind of people that we need to even be able to understand some of the materials that are being presented as part of the submissions to the NEB for the regulatory process. There are engineers and scientists and people with a great deal of expertise submit those reports, and for us as lay people to be able to understand any of what's being put forward is very challenging. So those limited resources are able to help us work with in our communities to identify issues that may impact or affect their way of life. And then it also assists us in being able to help those people go to the hearing and present oral evidence, because most of our culture is based on oral traditions and oral history. So that's the process in which we've used our intervenor funding, and we are grateful for the intervenor funding. But the challenges are this. What I want to tell you about being challenged is the fact that because we receive those limited dollars, it's perceived then by industry that they then shouldn't contribute towards assisting us in helping consult. They use that as their leverage to say that you've got funding and you don't need to receive resources to assist you in building the capacity to be consulted. And that actually is an unfair statement and puts us into an unfair place. Now, industry in Canada is challenged because the government does devolve their responsibility of consultation with Aboriginal people to industry. But at some point, it's not Aboriginal people's fault that we have to have capacity resources to be able to assist. So there are some challenges that we have to work through with industry so that they don't believe that the funding that we receive, participant funding, is the be-all, end-all, because truthfully it's like literally only maybe $15,000, $20,000, which is not going to take us very far when we have to start engaging people to come and review these submissions and come back and report to our communities so that we have an understanding of what those things mean to us. And it doesn't let us do traditional land use studies or even begin to understand or comprehend some of the things that are going on and how industry has already affected the issues that go on in our communities. So participant funding cannot be seen as the consultation be-all to end-all. It's got to work collaboratively together. The other thing I want to tell you that in Canada, it is quite true. Up until just recently, the public's involvement in many of the applications and projects that go on has been non-existent. And I mean, I am grateful to the NEB and to the Canadian Environmental Assessment for giving us opportunities like this. But the reality in Canada is that the majority of industrial development falls on the responsibility of the province, and the provinces will see things very differently than the federal government does. And in fact, actually, I come from Alberta, oil-rich Alberta, as everybody calls it, and I tell people and we must keep everything rolling. And in fact, I was told by one of the regulators in Alberta that we are here to approve projects, not disapprove anything. So our chances as public to have any input and involvement in a meaningful way is nil to none. Thank you.